witness.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Secretary, for your testimony here today. The American people, understandably, are very concerned about the integrity of our democratic processes and our voting systems. So just so that we can frame it very clearly, let me ask you, do you know of any law that requires even minimum basic cybersecurity protections for our voting systems?
No.
Any state law that requires it?
Sitting here now, I don't know the answer to that question. There may be.
And you described extensive efforts that you and others in the government took to work with the states on protecting the integrity of their voting systems, and you noted that most states complied and came forward and worked with the federal government. But it's also fair to say that some states did not come forward. Is that right?
Correct.
For those states that did come forward and work with the government, the federal government, you don't know what they did with that information that we provided to them or that advice?
Well, we do know there were a number of vulnerabilities identified and reported to the states, and I have to believe that they took steps to.
But we're acting on good faith that they did.
Well, it was in their interest to act on what we told them. So
sure, but you can't say conclusively that they took the advice that we gave them.
I can not say conclusively. There are probably others at the staff level in DHS who could give you more details about what we knew they did do.
Okay, thank you. And so we've talked today a great deal about election systems and databases that state and local governments oversee and operate, but I want to ask you about our major political parties. The Declassified Intelligence Community Assessment noted that Russian intelligence services conducted cyber operations associated with both major U.S. political parties. The ICA specifically discusses the systematic and relentless cyber attacks that the Russians perpetrated against the DNC, but it does also note that the Russians collected on Republican-affiliated targets. What's interesting is that they did not conduct a comparable disclosure or dumping of campaign material against the RNC. Just this week, the private security firm UpGuard reported its discovery that an RNC contractor left an immense amount of voter data, in fact 1.1 terabytes, according to the report, exposed and unsecured in publicly accessible online databases. The report says the data included information on roughly 200 million Americans. Clearly, neither political party is immune to the pitfalls of online data vulnerability or invincible to malicious hackers hunting for security lapses to exploit. So in light of the preceding discussion about election systems as critical infrastructure, which you've advocated for, do the political parties themselves, their network, financial and donor information, merit inclusion as well?
Well, that's an interesting question. The danger with going down that road is you start to lose clarity about what's critical infrastructure and what's not. The definition that I wrote on January 6th very clearly was confined to election infrastructure and not political organizations, because I thought we needed that clarity so everyone knows what is critical infrastructure and what is not. But I'm not disagreeing with the premise of your question. I think there needs to be greater awareness around the cybersecurity of political institutions in general and political campaigns.
And the next few questions are about consultations or how accessible essentially the resources would be to political parties. So when you were at DHS, was there any discussion in the government about whether campaigns should receive counterintelligence briefings or briefings about the threats to our elections or cyber threats to campaigns? And is this something that you would think is wise to do?
Provided it's done so on a bipartisan, nonpartisan basis, I think that information sharing of, the threats is a good idea.
And do political campaigns or the major political parties have the ability to work or contact DHS to obtain cybersecurity assistance or expertise? In other words, can they go forward to y'all and
Yes.
work with you on this stuff?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have concerns about the security and integrity of primary election voting systems or databases?
To the same extent I would for general elections, yes.
And how should we approach the security of the primary elections as integral components of our general elections and the overall electoral process?
I think the same. vulnerabilities that exist with respect to general elections exist with respect to primary elections, because to my knowledge, states run primaries mechanically the same way they run general elections, with the same voting machines and the same reporting mechanisms.
All right. Thank you. I yield back.